I am former product track chair for Denver Startup Week. Thank you, Denver Startup Week, for trying to pull this off completely virtually. Um, it's fantastic. It's ambitious and fantastic. And thank you again, Capital One Cafe, for the product track sponsor. Also bringing this event to life is Colorado Product. Hey there. Colorado Product has a vision of establishing Colorado as the center for all things product in the region. We cultivate networking events, professional engagement, speaking events, workshops, a variety of ways to get product people together and talking about the discipline of product management. Please hit up me or anyone else on the leadership team if you'd like to talk about future programming. Lastly, I'd like to introduce Sara, our speaker today. Sara lives in the Bay Area and hopefully is not being bothered too much by all the smoke and fire there. Thank you for joining us, Sara. Sara is the CEO and co-founder of Winnie, which is a hub for all things childcare. She, before that, worked at Twitter, Postmates, and Google. Today, she's going to give us a little bit of insight into how you may or may not find product market fit. With that, Sara, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I am being bothered by the smoke in the Bay Area. So if the skies are better over there, I may be on my way shortly. All right, let's see. Can you see my screen?
We've got Catalina.
Is this working? Is this thing on?
There it is. Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, so there may be a little bit of a lag. Oh, it says my, you know what, let me try to go on a slightly, better internet connection.
While Sara is doing that, one thing I forgot to mention is that I will be moderating the chat within Zoom. So if you have a question that you'd like to bring up, I'll be choosing a few of them for after the presentation Sara gives, and we can work them through.
All right. Is this any better? Let's try it now. All right. Hey, everyone. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
All right. I am Sara Mauskopf. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Winnie. And as Aaron was saying, Winnie is a childcare platform that helps over 7 million parents across the United States find daycare and preschool. But today I want to talk to you about a topic that's probably among the most important things when you're building a new feature or a product or a company, and that is finding product market fit. It's this elusive thing that every product leader or founder is after. And I was after it when I started Winnie. I was after it in previous roles as a product manager at Twitter and Postmates. So how do you actually get there? And when do you know if you are actually there? 4.5 years ago, we set out to build Winnie, and it's been a really windy path to achieving product market fit. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the concrete tactics we use to get there and the mistakes we made along the way, both of which hopefully can save you a bunch of time and heartache in finding product market fit for you, your products and future products. So first, what is product market fit? Well, this part is actually easy. Let's start with this simple definition from my buddy Mark Andreessen. Product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. That seems basic enough, but how do you find a good market and how do you build a product that can satisfy that market? That's pretty much exactly what I set out to do almost 5 years ago, and I want to take you along that path. So when we started Winnie, the market we started with was parents, and specifically this newer generation of millennial parents who were used to having everything online at their fingertips. And not only was this a lot of people, but it's a really spendy population. Parents are actually the largest consumer segment. And so we felt there was a market here. That box was checked. And once we had identified a big spendy market, all we needed to do was build a product to satisfy that market. And that part we thought like should be easy enough. We were parents ourselves. That's why we, set out to start Winnie in the first place. And we thought, we have a lot of problems, so we could just think of something that we were facing and build a product to solve that. And therefore it would help a lot of parents. And so we did what a lot of founders do, and we started building for ourselves in a problem we faced. And what we started building, we later kind of dubbed Yelp for parents. And the idea was pretty simple. Parents needed to know about all kinds of local places. Remember, this was pre-COVID, so people actually went places. Things to do with their kids on the weekend, family-friendly restaurants, libraries. We would list all those places in our app, and we would include reviews from parents and other information about these places that parents wanted to know about them, like if they had a changing table. So we basically built it, we launched it, and we sought to understand whether it had this elusive product market fit. So the first tactic that I'm going to share with you today, and the thing that I think we actually did right, was to launch it. We quickly built something and we got a lot of people using it. We didn't worry about it being perfectly polished. We didn't worry about it working everywhere for every use case. And lots of consumer products, I think, spend a long time in this like private beta or friends and family mode. But for us, it was a lot more important to understand whether this was a product that had real growth potential. And there was no way we were going to get enough usage to understand that in a private beta. And so what we did was we built this thing pretty quickly. We went from 6 months from idea to public launch on the App Store. People ask how we did that, and my answer is, like, my co-founder and I both code and we're very hands-on, so we were just able to do that. And by making it public and promoting it both ourselves and via featuring in the App Store, we got a good number of people using our product. And this is pretty important because we had data to work with. And this data quickly helped us figure out if we had product market fit. So we could start to understand if this thing was growing on its own. Were people telling their friends faster than we could? And the answer is no. And that's a picture of me pushing a boulder up a hill. It very much felt like an uphill battle. We did grow a lot that first year, but the growth was really driven by manual efforts and marketing stunts and growth hacks and paid acquisition and all sorts of other things that really just aren't scalable. And so the first mistake that we made was not being honest with ourselves about our growth. Like we could have learned in 6 months that this didn't have product market fit. But we kept kind of saying, like, eventually if enough people were using it and it got better, and if we built this feature or that feature, it would have product market fit. And I would say the key question to ask here is, are you forcing the growth or is it happening on its own? And if you don't have an engine that grows on its own, it's not product market fit. So eventually, we admitted to ourselves that we didn't have the organic growth that we needed to succeed. And the temptation there is to then go back to the drawing board. There's a famous move in startup land known as pivoting, and you just kind of start fresh with some totally different product and maybe even a different market. But we approached things differently. We didn't go back to square one. We knew the market was still good, and nothing about the product we launched kind of had proven that it wasn't a big market. We still felt parents were a really big market. And we suspected the product wasn't completely wrong. We had just hadn't gotten it completely right. The good news is we had a lot of parents using our product, and we had a lot of insights from their usage of what the right product could be. And so this brings us to the second tactic we employed, which was really useful, which is to see how users actually felt about our product. This it seems very obvious and basic in retrospect, but it took us a while to actually implement this, which is we measured the Net Promoter Score, which tells you how satisfied users are with your product. But one thing we did was we put an interesting twist on it. Since our product was basically Yelp for parents, it was a lot of different things and different use cases to different people. And it turns out like even the most simple product can have different use cases and mean different things to different types of people. So this exercise was really to understand whether there was any segment of the people using our product that were getting much more value than the other segments, and anyone who was a promoter. And essentially with the Net Promoter Score, you're looking for someone getting so much value that they're willing to promote the product on your behalf. And so we measured the Net Promoter Score for different use cases of Winnie and things you could do with Winnie. And this is really possible for any product. Think about how people are using your product or talk to them if you're not sure, and then segment users and measure the NPS of those specific use cases. And so we kind of identify these different things, finding activities, finding restaurants that were kid-friendly, getting parenting advice, connecting with other parents, or this other one that we didn't really consider, but we threw in there, finding daycare or preschool. And this is what helped us really discover the thing. We found that people who were using our product to find daycare and preschool were getting a lot more value out of the product than anyone else. This was really the killer use case. This is a message that I have now framed. I got it from my co-founder, Anne, kind of as we were getting the results from this Net Promoter Score survey. And it is the beginnings of what Winnie is today. So she was like, let's just figure out all the information for every daycare or preschool in San Francisco and make Winnie the best resource for finding those providers in San Francisco. Now we're across the country, but we started where we lived. And so what Anne proposed to me in that message was basically to collect detailed data on every licensed daycare and preschool, which is really an overwhelming thing to scale. But the smart thing she suggested was trying this in just San Francisco, which I think was, a very good tactic. And I am calling this scaling schmaling. And it's when you're trying to find product market fit, don't worry about how you're going to scale it yet. So we did all these things that were really anti-scaling. We collected information manually. We did it for just one city. We spent a bunch of money to get people to collect this information. We paid people, mostly stay-at-home moms, to collect data on daycares and preschools so we could really build out this comprehensive resource. And we launched it. We actually just posted about it in a local mothers group on Facebook. And this is just one of the screenshots of replies when we posted about it. And it just immediately blew everyone's mind. And after essentially like 2 years of trying to get the word out about stuff and no one caring, it was kind of instantaneous. We felt that this thing had legs. But then like something even cooler happened. And that is parents and providers started finding us on their own, which we attributed to word of mouth. And this is the kind of viral growth we were missing before, when people tell other people about your product for you. And finally, we were growing, and it wasn't just the result of our own effort. And by the way, like when you actually have kind of this growth, it sort of flattens the previous growth. So it was very obvious we didn't have exponential growth before. So then the question becomes, did we have product market fit at that point? And the answer is no, we didn't. And that is because we weren't making any money. It's totally free product. And so this brings me to our next mistake, which is that it's very different to have a free product people love versus asking them to pay for it. If you don't have people paying for it, it's not product market fit. And so then we kind of set out to find out what people would actually pay for. We had two hypotheses. We could charge parents for help finding childcare, or we could charge providers, the daycares and the preschools, for help filling their open spaces. We knew, we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin. We wanted to start with one way of making money. So we had to decide which path to go down. So essentially we put call outs in our product and we measured clicks on these different value propositions. We didn't take anyone's money. We just literally saw how many people clicked on each thing. And we actually saw a ton of parents and providers click on both of these respective value props. So we were like really excited. Both of these seemed really promising, just judging by clicks alone. And especially when it came to charging parents, we had so many parents using Winnie at this point, and they were all clicking through on find the daycare preschool of your dreams. So we were like, let's go for monetizing parents. We have a lot more of them and they're all clicking on this thing. We went ahead and we built a premium membership for parents. And this ended up being a huge mistake and waste of time, because what people say they will pay for or think they will pay for and what they will actually pay for are different. And once we built the real thing, we found that parents just bailed at checkout. They didn't actually want to pay for a membership to find childcare. They would pay for childcare and they desperately needed childcare, but they weren't willing to pay for help finding it, no matter how good that was. And that brings us to tactic 4, which is money talks. There's a really big tendency to guess based on usage or other kinds of, user research, what people will pay for. Or assume that if you have free users, you'll eventually have paid users. This is especially tempting if you aren't ready to take on actual customers. Like we hadn't built any payment mechanism. We didn't really have something that was fully polished. So we felt really like we shouldn't take people's money for real. But it turns out what people will say they will pay for and what they will actually pay for are very different. And you have to take people's money and you have to do it for enough people to know that you can build the real thing. And it turns out you don't have to even do anything fancy to take people's money. We started testing this manually just using Square, sending invoices and taking payments through Square. It wasn't integrated into the product at all. And we took money there's a question about B2B or B2C. We actually ended up taking money from providers, from these daycare and preschool businesses. And that turned out to be, it was very clear. Providers are businesses. They need to fill their open spaces, and filling an open space for a daycare or preschool is like a hugely profitable activity. They're, charging $1,000 a month for a space on average, and in places that are expensive cities, much more. And so they're absolutely willing to pay to fill their open spaces. And once we had a lot of providers paying us through these manual invoices in Square, it got to a point where we realized, like, of course we need to build payment functionality. This is really, we're dealing with too much manual work here and we're making money. We should just build this into the product. So after all this, my definition of product market fit, I would put a slight tweak on Mark Andreessen's definition, which is that it means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market and make money. You can't just solve a problem and create value. Your product also needs to be able to capture that value. Once we had a market, in our case, that was millennial parents, and we had a product that satisfied that market, in our case, finding childcare, and it made money. Providers now pay us to help them fill their open spaces. We feel we finally have achieved product market fit. So that's, over 4.5 years later. So to recap, there are really 4 tactics that we use to eventually find this elusive product market fit. First, we launched quickly. This allowed us to find out we didn't have true product market fit when we were finally honest with ourselves. Next, we followed the NPS, or Net Promoter Score. We found a subset of our users that were getting a lot of value out of the product, and we focused on them. And then third, we did something very manually, and we didn't worry about scaling it. And this is what gave us a lot of confidence that we were on to the right thing and we could take the time to scale it. And then finally, we figured out how we were going to make money. If I were doing this all over again, that would not have been the 4th thing we did. It would have been 1st or 2nd or maybe 3rd. This all took a lot of time. It didn't happen overnight. And we were incredibly cheap to give ourselves so much time and runway to figure this out. But eventually we got there, and now the real fun of growth and scaling begins. So thank you so much. I'm excited to answer questions. If you are looking for a daycare preschool, or you know someone who is, Winnie now has over 200,000 licensed providers across the United States on its platform. And it's totally free for parents to use. We don't monetize parents. So tell all your parent friends to check it out, or yourself if you're a parent. And with the remaining time, I'd love to take any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A in Zoom. Thank you, Sarah.
Stop sharing a bit.
So it looks like a couple questions on how do you feel like these tactics that you took at Winnie would work for B2B just as well as B2C?
Yeah, and I think you know, we originally thought of ourselves as B2C, and we still kind of get classified in that bucket because we have a great consumer-friendly product for parents. But we make money from businesses. It's not parents, it's not consumers who pay us, it's businesses. And kind of what I didn't talk about today is on the entire back end of Winnie is a lot of stuff and functionality we built for the daycare and preschool providers. So they log in and they see a very different kind of Winnie, where they can track their leads and messages from parents. They see a dashboard, and building for them was almost like, you know, completely starting from scratch. They're a totally different kind of user. They have very different needs from parents, and kind of getting in their head and how they operate has been, you know, it's something we're still learning and doing. But I think some of the principles of understanding, like, who is going to pay you, you know, doing things that don't scale initially to get to that as fast as possible, are very true, and possibly even more true, because you can kind of go down a bad path of doing a lot of stuff for a customer that isn't going to make you any money or be willing to pay. And there are businesses like that on our platform that are they're not ever going to spend money on marketing.
Great. Let's try something different here. Ben Wright, you raised your hand. I'm going to allow you to talk here.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So product market fit is definitely that elusive thing. I wonder if you have run into this or have seen this with others, where they mistake strong organic traffic from Google to be product market fit. And do you see those as synonymous?
Yeah. So we have strong organic traffic from Google. And that's actually how we get a lot of our users is, you know, if you search for preschool in Denver, daycare in Denver, hopefully we rank. I haven't actually tested that one. But we just have a very long tail of search traffic for these markets. And that's kind of our, you know, user acquisition strategy, in the same way that some people would buy ads. I think the important thing, and the thing we look for, is to see that we are starting to flip markets and have them go from mostly search traffic driven to direct traffic. So do we have people coming to Winnie.com in Denver, not via a search, but directly navigating to the website or directly downloading our app from the App Store? That to us indicates there's some word of mouth going on. And we kind of have this path where we see it definitely starts with the search traffic. People haven't heard of Winnie, they're turning to Google to do searches. But then at some point we get enough traction in a market that people share us, and then we see people navigate to us directly. That said, there are really big businesses that are built on, you know, Google search traffic, organic traffic. But it's, you know, not as defensible as having multiple channels, and word of mouth and brand is the most defensible one of the most defensible ones there is. Does that answer the question? he's gone, so I can't have.
Yeah. I may have sent him away. There, Ben, if you have a follow-up, type it back in there and I'll get back to you. Gary asks, what type of prototypes did you utilize to test the idea even before and during the 6-month timeline to launch your app? And how would you do that part differently now?
Yeah. I mean, I think because we are both, I mean, I'm the least engineering of myself and my co-founder, but I still like to code and my co-founder builds apps. Like we kind of just went right for building the thing, which probably reflects some of our like engineering bias. I think, there are easier ways that, to your point, like would have taken a lot less time. That even 6 months is a long time in a startup. And the faster you can test something, even if it's a smaller thing, and get real data from real people, the better. And so I kind of wish that we had not just like built a app to have to fully launch on the App Store, even if we could do it pretty quickly. If there were things that we could have done faster, I wish we would have done them, like get up a landing page or get some ads out there, get some data earlier.
Thank you. David asks, are there quantitative metrics that you can use to monitor product market fit?
Yeah. I think we are a very quantitative company. And I think, of course, you need to measure things like usage, and, active users and how many of those actives are daily actives, and that sort of thing are all indicators that, your product is resonating. I think one of the reasons NPS is such a good complement to those more quantitative metrics is that it's hard to game. Like we were really able, especially in the early days, to kind of step on the needle, and game some of these metrics by, having email digest that brought people back to the app every week. And then we started sending it multiple times a week, and suddenly we were having daily actives. It's like that we were going after the metric instead of really understanding, was this product really valuable to people? So I think if you do rely solely on quantitative metrics, like you kind of have to make sure you're not growth hacking them. And maybe that was just our background, is we kind of growth hacked ourselves into thinking our product was resonating more than it was.
That makes perfect sense to me. Ebony asks, what are your next steps for scaling?
Yeah, all the fun stuff now. I mean, we are mostly a product and engineering org, and now that we have real customers who are relying on Winnie as part of their business, we need to develop other functions like sales and support, and think about things like marketing and things that we kind of have done in a more ad hoc way as we build out the product. Now we're starting to scale those functions, and the team. I think it was we have a pretty small team, and now that we're making money and we want to grow revenue, it starts to make sense to scale that team.
Great. One of my Colorado product leadership team and co-founder, Adam, asks, are there clear inflection points in the journey to product market fit where it makes sense to take on more or expel funding from whatever source that might be?
Yeah. I think what we found is that we had to take funding when we could, rather than like when we necessarily had the perfect use for it. And so in the beginning, when we were just starting out, there was a lot of interest in funding us. And we actually had the idea that like, oh, we don't want to take a lot of money right away until we kind of know we have something really valuable. And And so we originally closed just a really tiny like pre-seed round. And then we got some advice that I am grateful for, because I think it was good advice, that we should reopen that round and take kind of a more substantial amount of money to get us started. And I think that was good, because it then became very difficult to raise the next round of funding once we actually had a product out there and people could use it and see that it wasn't all that great and life-changing. So sometimes you just have to take money when it's available to you, even if you're not quite sure yet if you need all that money, because you don't know when it will be available again. And then, it's better in your bank account than in an investor's, like just keep it in your bank account. But the thing we did well was we didn't spend that money just because we had it. We waited, until we have, and I think we're still very, very frugal, because we make sure we have something to step on the needle for. And we actually, kind of have pulled back a bit with COVID, to kind of understand like what is happening to the childcare market right now. Are businesses willing to spend more because they've lost parents in their childcare business, or are they, going out of business and therefore can't pay for marketing? And what we're finding is they're actually willing to spend more right now because they need the business. And so now is a time for us to kind of step on the gas, but we waited, it's been like, how long have we been in this COVID thing? It's been a while that we've waited to kind of make sure before spending extra money, because as soon as you run out of money, you're done. That's the only thing that's game over. So we're very conscious of that.
Okay, I'm going to choose a few more here. Hannah asks, how soon after launch did you start monetizing? I believe you said you were a little too late, or wish you could have done it earlier, but what research went into how much you were going to charge your customers?
Yeah, so we, it took like at least 3 years until we had any form of monetization. I think I would say less that it was, I wish I would have monetized sooner, but I wish I would have understood how we were going to make money, even if we didn't capture all of the value. We still way undercharge for the value that we provide. I mean, we have our biggest customers telling us that like a lead from Winnie is more likely to enroll in their childcare program, but we charge less than leads they get from other sources. And that's kind of on purpose right now, because we want to grow and we want more customers. And so we're not worried yet about extracting like all of the value we could possibly extract. We're worried more about understanding like what is the value we're actually driving. That's really important to understand. And can we get people to pay us for it? But it's okay if we're kind of underpricing right now, as we kind of focus on growth and building these, strong customer relationships.
Dylan asks, when you do launch your sales function, how do you plan to harmonize sales, product, and engineering?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to. I mean, we kind of have this is, I think, the growing pains of scaling that we're actually facing now, is that we have people in the company now that are not engineers, which is kind of new for us, and making sure, especially in a remote environment, we're all working from home, that we're able to speak the same language and we have opportunities to interact and, all feel like we're on the same team. It's really tough. So I will take any suggestions you have for that, for sure.
Right on. Do you think you would have been able to monetize your product in the same way if you hadn't been able to demonstrate how much consumers loved your product to providers? And in hindsight, do you think you should have monetized sooner? I think you've touched on that part.
Yeah. I mean, we couldn't have monetized sooner because what we're essentially selling to providers is this audience, highly intentional audience of parents seeking childcare. And so like, until we had that, we couldn't have made money from it. But the thing I really wish we would have understood was that was what we were eventually going to make money from, is this audience of intentional parents seeking childcare. because it would have got us much faster to the product we have today. We wouldn't have been worried about parents seeking parks and playgrounds or family-friendly restaurants if we knew that the thing we were monetizing was parents seeking childcare.
Super. Last one. Did you sense any hit to your NPS when Winnie introduced those B2B forces on the back end? And how is balancing happiness for both parents and daycare business owners that are also hoping to find their own product market fit?
Yeah, it's something we think about a lot. I mean, I think the nice thing about our product is that revenue growth and user growth are pretty nicely aligned. The more providers that come on our platform and claim their page and update information and use our free product, the better it is for parents seeking childcare because they get up-to-date information. They get a response back when they message a provider. And for the monetization side of it, like the more providers who are using the free product, the more providers who have a chance of upgrading to our paid products. So it's pretty well aligned. I think the things that are not aligned are like, if we were to not show the licensing information of a provider because they had, a complaint filed against them. Some providers with kind of a bad track record from licensing want us to remove the license from their Winnie page. But that is a super important feature for parents to understand the quality of a provider. And it's kind of what Winnie stands for. So we just have a set of kind of principles we don't compromise on. And one of those is like high quality childcare. And so if someone wants to advertise with us or pay us a lot of money, but we don't think they're high quality, or they're asking to misrepresent their business by removing licensing information or removing a review, like we just don't allow that under any circumstance. And so I think, there are times when there's going to be a mismatch between just like straight revenue growth and user happiness and delight. And so we kind of always optimize for the user happiness at the end of the day, because if we don't have parents using Winnie and happy with our product and finding quality childcare, we will not have anything to sell to providers.
Right on. Hey, Sarah, thank you for a great presentation and Q&A.
Thank you.
Sarah's very active on Twitter. I imagine if you wanted to mention her there, she may be able to answer another question or two over the course of the next coming weeks. But on behalf of Denver Startup Week and Colorado Product, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Denver Startup Week, I imagine you have another video.
We are all set. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Cool.